Morning, everybody. Did you hear the ding ding all right? That's our secondary good morning. So everybody found their seats and all right, I'm hearing hands back there. Can you hear me? David, turn us up a little bit, but not too much. I don't want them to hear everything I say. I may mumble on something up here. Okay, that's good enough. Anyhow, welcome to UU Columbia. My name is Richard McLeod, and you are stuck with me as your service leader of the day. Our minister, Reverend Stephen Robinson, is not in the pulpit today. We do have a guest speaker and some other guest activities, so be prepared for that. There are days when we have lots of different interesting speakers from our congregation or from the community, so be prepared for that. This service is being streamed on YouTube and on Zoom, so you have your choice of attending in person like you are, or on our virtual services like David is sending out right now. But if you're here, you can enjoy the fellowship of us all and you can enjoy the cookies afterwards. So that to me is a big deal. Please make sure that you read the announcements in your order of service, which you should have in your hands, and be sure to read the weekly events, which should be, or have been, if you get them, should be emailed to you every Thursday. The website is full of things, so uucolumbia.org, go on to that, and you'll pick up on everything that goes on here, so you don't want to lose it. I would suggest you even keep a tab open on your web browser so you can click on it anytime and go right straight to UU Columbia. Please practice this church's COVID restrictions that you have been seeing on the TV screen. What you see up here, okay, at the moment it's a flag, but what you have been watching on the TV screen is the latest guidelines from the board and from the committee about masks. And at the moment, what it says is it's kind of up to you. If you know more than 2 people that caught COVID within the last week, then you should wear a mask to avoid any more exposure. And that's just kind of a general rule of thumb from Dr. Pettis, who is not with us this morning because he has had a COVID exposure. Now, as I understand it, the young folks will be dismissed to their own classes in a little while. So if they're not yet, and parents, if you need a distraction for them, otherwise, we do have toys and books as well as them being dismissed later on. The flowers today have not been delivered yet. I didn't hear you, but she left them by the door last night, but we don't have them. Anyhow, thanks to Carita Barr for bringing the flowers as far as the door. Yeah, Yoli's going to have a look, see if they came any further than that. Okay, now please silence all your electronic devices as we center ourselves and prepare for this morning's service and listen to the prelude.
I'm pleased to welcome Karen Peters as violist in this morning's service, and we'll begin by playing Prayer for Ukraine, a composition by Ukrainian composer Mykola Lysenko, who was also a pianist, conductor, and ethnomusicologist.
Thank you, Karen and Anna. That's a beautiful piece. Now, if you would please stand and join me in the congregational affirmation as found in your order of service. Oh, a moment. Stand for the flowers. Oh, beautiful flowers, yes. What?
On the screen? It might
No.
be
Oh, not right now. Okay, anyhow, back to this. All right, our affirmation. Love is the doctrine of this congregation. The quest for truth is its sacrament, and service is its prayer. To dwell together in peace, to seek knowledge in freedom, to serve others in community. Thus do we covenant with one another. Thank you. Please be seated. Unitarian Universalism is a covenantal religion, diverse and non-creedal. We don't have to believe the same in order to treat each other the same, with respect, equity, compassion, and dignity. We are a community that is based on deeds, not creeds. This community sides with love, embracing all people regardless of age, color, race, socioeconomic status, physical ability, or religious background. We invite families and young children. We invite LGBTQ individuals because we have been officially designated as a welcoming congregation. We invite and almost insist that you wear name tags so we can remember you and get to know your names. The folks with green name tags are on our board of directors. Can I see who you are? Stand up so people can see you. Board of directors, our trustees. A few of you here? Good. So if you have any questions, complaints, they may or may not welcome them. Depends on what they are. Now, at this time, we want to meet those of you who are visiting today. Do we have any visitors in the audience? We'd like to have you stand and have you, Kevin, can you take this? Can you take this around? If you wait for the microphone to come by, and just tell us who you are. Maybe this is all about you. Oh, what? My microphone.
My name is Sharon Givens, and I live up in near Blythewood.
My name is Corbin Donahue, and I'm Matthew Donahue's son.
I'm Solera, and this is my son, Caleb, and we're moving. This is my hometown, Columbia, so it's been about 20 years since I've been here, but it's nice to be back.
I'm Carrie, and this is my husband, Tyler. And our baby girl's name is Lena.
Welcome.
Hi, my name is Bobby Dyer, and I just moved to 5 Points from Irmo in July, and this is my first time to a Universalist church ever.
Welcome. Glad you're here. Yeah, thank you, Kevin. Appreciate you taking that around. And good, we have a veritable plethora of visitors this morning. I like that. And I like to say that word. That's why I also said that. So, anyhow, visitors, we ask that you fill out a visitor's card, if you will, and put it in the collection plate. There should be one in the chair in back of you. We won't show up at your door unannounced, so don't worry about that. That's just so we can send you out a newsletter or an occasional email. Now, let's take a moment to greet each other. So those of you here in the congregation, stand up, turn around, check with those nearby, give them a fist bump, a big smile. Okay, if we can come back together, please. Ladies and gentlemen, if we can come back together, please. I know you hate that. This is the fun time during the service. Meet new people, say hello to them. But really, I always wondered that if I just let you go, how long it would be for you. Tuesday, maybe? Yeah. Our chalice lighter today is Lee Mingy, and she will say a few words, and then she will light the chalice for us. Lee?
Thank you, Richard.
I think that's good.
That's perfect. Good morning. I have been around for a long time. On Earth and and at the UU. It is a great joy to see so many new faces as well as old familiar ones. During these years, I've been involved in various aspects of our religious life, but when the Berlin Wall came down in 1990 and our fellowship was offered the opportunity to take part in the new partner church program, several of us met with the minister at the time and jumped at the opportunity to be paired with a small church in Bistrița, Transylvania, Romania. As a result of that, and let me just parenthetically say, recently, there was a service about volunteering, and I don't know whether it was stressed enough at that service that when you're involved with a committee, it is not only what you're doing, but who you're doing it with that means so much. And that has been true for me in my committee work with the partner church. So not only the folks across the sea, but those with whom I have worked here in Colombia. On a pilgrimage that the UUCC took to our partner church in Transylvania, we were privileged to visit sites and come in contact with religious icons of our tradition. One such was the chalice that was used by our martyred founder, Reverend Francis David. This chalice is preserved behind glass doors, but we not only saw it, but we held it. So this morning, as I light this chalice for us here, I invite us to think contemporaneously of all the chalices that are being lit in other UU churches and Unitarian churches in Canada and Europe and beyond, and to think back through the ages to the 15th century when our first chalice was brought into being.
I invite you to join in singing our opening hymn, number 159, This Is My Song. You can find it in your gray hymnal. Please stand as you're willing and able to join in singing.
Thank you. Be seated. Beautiful song, and certainly appropriate for this service today that concentrates on our international friends, our partner church, and the problems that so many of them are having in these times. It is my pleasure to introduce our guest speaker for today, which will come up here in a few moments anyhow. Dr. Don Cooper first connected with Unitarianism in 1954 in a Unitarian church located in a tiny retired synagogue in his hometown in Virginia. He first connected with UUCC when he moved to Columbia and USC in 1997. Since at that time the Star of David indicating that the building was a former synagogue was still on this building, he thought that he must be in the right place, and he was right. Although he has come and gone from Columbia for a long time, the UUCC remained his home church in his mind, and he is glad to be back. He is more active at UUCC than would indicate good sense. Now, these are his words. I didn't say that, he said that. But this talk particularly relates to his participation in the partner church group, as we will hear his sermon later on today. Opening words, Jane.
Hi, everyone. The opening words today come from a poem by Warren Shire, who had to leave her home. No one leaves home unless home is the mouth of a shark. You only run for the border when you see the whole city running as well. Your neighbors running faster than you, the boy you went to school with who kissed you dizzy behind the old tin factory is holding a gun bigger than his body. You only leave home when home won't let you stay. No one would leave home unless home chased you, fire under feet, hot blood in your belly. It's not something you ever thought about doing, and so when you did, you carried the anthem under your breath, waiting until the airport toilet to tear up the passport and swallow it. Each mouthful of paper making it clear that you would not ever be going back. You have to understand, no one puts their children in a boat unless the water is safer than the land. Who would choose to spend days and nights in the stomach of a truck unless the miles traveled meant something more than journey? No one would ever crawl under fences, be beaten until your shadow leaves you, raped, then drowned, forced to the bottom of the boat because you're darker, be sold and starved, shot at the border like a sick animal, be pitied, lose your name, lose your family, make a refugee camp a home for a year or 2 or 10. I want to go home, but home is the mouth of a shark. Home is the barrel of a gun, and no one would leave home unless home chased you to the shore, unless home tells you to leave what you could not behind, even if it was human. No one leaves home until home is a damp voice in your ear saying, leave, run now. I don't know what I've become.
Wow, that's beautiful. You listen to something like that and it makes you feel such compassion to those people who do have to flee their homes. And it also makes you glad for the freedoms you have. Am I right? Story for all ages. Yoli. Yes. Are there any children that want to come forward and sit on the rug here and listen to the story for all ages?
Hello everybody. It's okay if I take my mask off, it'll be easier. Also, my glasses won't fog up when I read. I can't see everybody.
You can either hold this, but you have to stand pretty close to it.
Yeah, okay, good, that's it. Yeah, thank you. This is better. Okay, how many
You got a corner.
How many of you kids have been through or seen a really scary situation that really frightened you, that was happening in the world, around you, at home, in the city? You have? A couple of you raised your hands, yeah. And when you were scared like that, what was the first thing you wanted to do? Do you remember? Did you want to hide? Did you run to your mom and dad or your aunt and uncle, your grandparents, or just somewhere that you felt safe? Well, I want to tell you that happened to me when I was a kid. And there was a war starting around me, around my family, in my city, in my country. And yes, I wanted to hide. And I'm glad that I had my family and my aunts and uncles and my grandparents that were there to protect me and tell me that everything was okay. And there were also other people that helped me a lot, people that I had never even seen before. And that happened when my parents and my family had to send me and my brother away to the United States so we could be safe from the war and the terrible things that were happening in my country. So, did you ever hear about Mr. Rogers, the man that used to tell stories to kids when he was little? He talked about when you were very scared and something terrible was happening. His mother told him, look for the helpers. Just find the helpers. And it's true, there's always someone around that could help you out and help you go through that scary part. The book today is called When the Wild Wind Came. And it's a little girl who remembers a really hard and scary time in her life when there was a wild wind, which was probably a tornado where she lived in her family. Okay, let's see how I can juggle this microphone. Oh, thank you. Thank you very much. That will work. Okay. When the Wild Wind Came was written by Dorothy Loon. I remember my father shouting at the cattle. They lived in a farm. I remember my mother learning of the weeds, tearing the weeds in the farm. I remember my baby brother whimpering every day. I remember when the wind came. Ooh, it's really hard wind. I remember it blowing harder and harder and harder. I remember my mother grabbing up my baby brother. I remember her running with him in her arms. I remember my father opening the door to the root cellar. Everybody's running. It's really scary. I remember sitting in the darkness. Where are they now? In the root cellar under the ground. I remember the silence over us. I wanted to say something, but I couldn't. I didn't know how. Our home was gone when we came out. Somehow, out of the ruin, my mother made us something to eat. It was my job to do the dishes. I found soap in the rubble, and I found water in the bowl. I don't know why I did it. I wasn't even thinking. Maybe I was crying. Maybe tears were running down my cheeks. Maybe the only thing I felt like was making a circle with my thumb and first finger and blowing a bubble. 1, 2, and then another. My baby brother was giggling. He was reaching toward the bubbles that I made. My brother let out a laugh. My mother laughed with him. Those laughs didn't change anything. They made no difference. Those laughs changed everything. They made all the difference in the world. And why do you think those laughs made a difference? Mm-hmm.
They were all still like happy and like it showed that they could live on throughout this like a terrible thing happened, but just because their home was destroyed didn't mean their relationship and their love for each other was destroyed.
I wish I had given you the mic. She says because everybody thought that they could be okay after this. Mm-hmm.
It was because they were sad and they felt joy because they were laughing.
Yes. Any more ideas? So remember that when something scary happens to you, you can always make bubbles and laugh and find something to laugh with. Okay.
Take them in the back for more activities. Now, Yoli, thank you for that nice children's story. You had some response. And I think they wanted to talk even more about that. It's now time for our Candles of Community. Candles of Community is a time when we share our personal joys, concerns, sorrows. So if you picked up a candle from the basket out in the foyer, you can come forward now and light your own candle. Those of you who are on streaming, if you have a joy or sorrow you want to have recognized during this time, all you have to do is call or write our administrator, and we will read those from the pulpit. So, who has a candle? Connie?
I'm lighting a candle for President Carter. Many of you know that he has left the hospital and has gone into hospice and does not have much time left. It's also for Rosalind. Kevin and I lived in Georgia almost 30 years. We've been to the Carter Center. I had the privilege of having the president and Rosalind walk past me when I was in the High Museum. I wasn't able to talk to him because there were plenty of Secret Service people around him, but and many in the church we came from had gone down often to the church that he used to do Sunday service with, and has, up until he really got sick. So I'm wishing him well. He's lived a good life, and he's done a lot, and so has Rosalind, for all of us.
Good morning, I'm Bud Ashley. I have a candle of concern and one of great joy. Besides the unjust things that's happening in Ukraine, I just recently learned, like yesterday, that there have been 67 mass shootings in the United States this year. That's more than one a day. That concerns me, that something has to be happening to stop this. The joy that we have is an anniversary, and my wife Chuck has not smoked a cigarette in over 20 years now.
I don't think we can ever say enough about Jimmy, so this is another one for Jimmy.
I'd like to light a candle for East Palestine, but not just East Palestine. The degradation of our infrastructure is so severe. There was another chemical explosion in Florida, one here in South Carolina, another in Texas, more in Michigan. It reminds me of the Bhopal disaster in India that happened in 1984, where 500,000 people were affected by a chemical explosion. And the people who were accountable for the decisions that led to that destruction only spent 2 years in jail and got fines of $2,000. People are comparing East Palestine a lot to Chernobyl, but what it is more is Bhopal, because we're at high risk of these people not being held accountable for the destruction that they've caused. So this is for them.
I've had a lot of stuff in my heart, so this candle is for the women and men and protesting in Women Life Freedom in Iran, right? Our LGBTQIA community in America being under attack by nationalism and MAGA. Also for our women who cannot get health care because of our Roe versus Wade being taken, I think is what it is. I'm not aware of all of these things, but it's also Black Lives Matter, so something can happen for the police brutality. It needs to change. And then lastly, for my children, my 4 children.
Good morning. My name is Tom Clements, and I didn't have this joy until words were said about Jimmy Carter, but I will share it. He came to speak at my high school in Atlanta when he was running for governor, and he took a question and answer period right after that. And the first question from a student was, "How much money do you make as a peanut farmer?" And the whole place just broke up in laughter. And I remember Jimmy Carter laughing about it as well. Anyway, it was a fun moment. But my concern is, many of you know that I work at the winter shelter, homeless shelter. And there's a very troubling thing that happened the other night. That the first thing I was thinking this morning, I'm sore afraid for somebody, not for myself, but using the biblical expression. One of our clients witnessed an assault on the bus that brings people to the shelter. And he came in with several of his teeth punched out that night, which was upsetting in itself. But we knew he had witnessed it, and the police came, and they wanted to question him so he could give evidence about what happened. And they interviewed him inside the shelter with many of the clients, including friends of the assailant, witnessed this. And the staff there was appalled and said, he should go into a witness protection program. So I don't know what's happened to Bruce. I've known him for many years as a client friend. I'm quite worried about him, and he has not been seen by staff or anybody for a week. And the assailant was a very violent person. I was there last night, and the transition has not seen him, and I'm going to go looking for him at some of the soup kitchens tomorrow. But for what it's worth, please keep Bruce in your thoughts, and I hope he turns up. I hope he's laying low, but I'm quite afraid for what might have happened. Anyway, thank you.
And we do save another space here for those thoughts, those concerns, unspoken, that just lie in your hearts. And let's take a moment just of silent meditation to consider these things that we've just heard. Okay. This congregation contributes to Share the Plate, where half of our cash collection each week goes to local charities. It's a way for us to give back to the community that we live in. This month's Share the Plate recipient is Appleseed Legal Justice Center, which fights for low-income South Carolinians to overcome social, economic, and legal injustice. Their goal is to influence policymakers to ensure the law is fair, to educate the public and their advocates about the law, and to assist attorneys in bringing systemic litigation wherever laws are unfair. You may see more about them at scjustice.org. If you contribute by check, please write Share the Plate on the memo line, or you may make an online contribution even if you are streaming. I hope you noticed earlier we had on the big screen the amount that Share the Plate has contributed over the last 11 years in that cycle since we started. And the amount, $126,000 over the last 11 years. Part of that goes to, and that much goes to the local community, and that much goes to our general fund. So thank you all for that. So will the ushers please come forward?
This morning's offertory music is the national anthem of Ukraine, arranged for piano by Daniel Light and composed by Mikhailo Verbitsky, a Ukrainian Greek Catholic priest and composer.
Thank you, Anna. The Ukrainian national anthem. Thank you for your offerings today. It demonstrates that you are indeed a giving community, so thank you. Now, I introduced and read a little bio earlier for Dr. Don Cooper, who is our guest speaker today. Dr. Cooper, the floor is yours.
Let's see. Can we move this thing down some? Okay, thank you. Some years ago, I presented a scientific paper at a medical meeting in the Russian city of Yekaterinburg, located on the eastern side of the Ural Mountains, which form the eastern edge of European Russia. One afternoon, members of the meeting were invited to take a bus trip to visit an area to which much of Russian heavy industry had been moved during World War II to keep it out of the hands of the Germans. At one point, the bus stopped briefly, and I saw a sign on which one arrow pointed left, back towards the mountains, and it was marked Europe. The other arrow pointed right towards the plains and was marked Asia. We were at the border between two worlds. I think of the position of Ukraine as similar to that sign. Ukraine has better relations with Western Europe than Russia does, and now those connections have led to military support of Ukraine against the Russian invasion, support from Western Europe and the US. In order to persuade the Russian people to support his war of aggression against Ukraine, at every step, Putin has exaggerated and intensified the opposition and conflict between East and West, making them worse quite intentionally. Unexpectedly, so far the progress of the war has indicated that the Russian military is not in a condition to overcome the determined resistance of even a smaller opponent, such as Ukraine. The eventual outcome must be uncertain. When Richard McLeod invited me to talk about the present conflict in Ukraine, he said he did so because I was the only person in the congregation who'd actually been there. So far as I know, that's true, since once I presented a paper at a medical meeting in Kiev, the capital of Ukraine. Although I was supposed to lecture in English for the sake of West Europeans present, at the repeated request of Russian-speaking participants, I translated my paper into Russian in my hotel room and presented my paper in Russian. I could do so only because in my early life, I spent more than a decade primarily in the study of the languages and in some cases the literatures of Eastern Europe. Some of you know that eventually my professional life shifted so that I became a research professor of otolaryngology, or ear, nose, and throat issues. That's the subject of almost all my publications, except for one really anomalous case when I was drafted by the Society of Biblical Literature to take over and publish a scholarly project which required my knowledge of Greek and Old Bulgarian, a 9th century language related to Russian. How and why I shifted from the study of such things as religious texts in Greek and Old Bulgarian in my early life to the investigation of the physiology of the larynx is a different story, which I must skip for now. What I will talk about today is not so much the present military conflict in Ukraine, which you can read about any day in the newspapers, as its broader context. This context appears immediately if we do no more than examine the names of the most prominent participants in the conflict, remembering that the Russian and Ukrainian languages are close relatives, partly similar, but definitely different. On the Russian side is Vladimir Putin, and on the Ukrainian side is Volodymyr Zelensky. The name Vladimir means rule the world. I suspect that Putin likes that idea. The name Vladimir, however, is not really a Russian name, but an old Bulgarian one. Its use recalls that in 988 AD, Prince Vladimir of Kiev was baptized, and he made Christianity the official religion of his dominions. On the other hand, the real Russian form of his name, with the same meaning, is Volodymyr, the first name of the present leader of Ukraine. The difference in linguistic form is significant, and many details. The Ukrainian language is more genuinely Russian than literary Russian is. On the other hand, both Russian and Ukrainian languages have been changed by the influence of other languages. The influence on Ukrainian language and culture has come mainly from Poland and from the Polish. Literary Russian shows the influence of Old Bulgarian. Other cultural areas have followed similar patterns of development. Some of these influences are very ancient. For instance, the Greeks established colonies on the northern shores of the Black Sea, which are in modern Ukraine, as early as the 7th century BC. Greeks lived in the areas of such former colonies until they were expelled by the Soviets in the middle of the 20th century. Now, Kiev, which I've already mentioned, is the third largest city in the East Slavic area. By East Slavic, I mean the area including Ukraine and Russia and Belarus. Evidence of human settlement in the area of Kiev goes back roughly 40,000 years. Archaeological evidence indicates that the city of Kiev was established in a period estimated from the 5th to the 7th centuries AD. From the 9th to the 12th centuries, Kiev was the capital of Russia long before the establishment of Moscow or St. Petersburg. In this period, when it was the capital, Kiev had much interaction with Western Europe as well as with Constantinople. The establishment of Orthodox Christianity in Ukraine in 988 AD also brought literacy and a written tradition, at first mostly in Old Bulgarian, to Kiev. Thus, Kiev was the center of early civilization in the East Slavic area. Today, such monuments in Kiev as the St. Sophia Cathedral from the 11th century and the Kiev Cave Monastery from the same early period, both of which I have visited, remain as witnesses to this flowering period. I worry whether they will survive the brutality of Putin's military. The subsequent period was less glorious. The Mongols invaded Ukraine in the 13th century, and subsequently Ukraine came under Lithuanian and Polish rule until the 17th century. In the late 17th century, eastern Ukraine was acquired by the part of Russia ruled from Moscow, while western Ukraine was long ruled by Poland. Only at the end of World War II were most Ukrainian-speaking areas united in one state of the Soviet Union. Now let us shift in the direction of present-day events in and around Ukraine, but we will go by a literary detour, which will allow me to introduce you to the great poets of Russia and Ukraine. The Russian poet Alexander Pushkin, writing in the early 19th century in his grand poem, The Prophet, described how a man was transformed into a prophet who should speak the words of God to humans. The Ukrainian poet Taras Shevchenko, writing a little later in Ukrainian, wrote a poem with the same title and probably written as a response to Pushkin. He wrote that in that time, the Lord, and I quote, instead of a gentle prophet, ordered to give you the Tsar, end of quote. In our time, the dictator Putin has put on the mantle of the Tsar, waging a war with Ukraine as a step towards reconstruction of the Soviet Union, like the Russian Empire. Although we in the West have only for the past year read about Russian aggression in Ukraine, this war has actually been going on for a long time on many other fronts. At the eastern end of the Black Sea, Russia has exerted its influence on the former Soviet states of Georgia, Armenia, and Azerbaijan by intimidating these small countries and playing them off against each other. In Moldova, located between Ukraine and Romania, which ethnically should be part of Romania, the Russians have played the same game as in eastern Ukraine, settling Russians in some areas in order to take those areas over and eventually take over the whole country. The Baltic countries of Estonia, Lithuania, and Latvia observed the course of events, nervously supporting Ukraine. They do not want to be part of a reconstituted Soviet Union. During the Soviet period, these states received substantial Russian minorities, which they have had only limited success in assimilating and making real citizens of their countries of residence. Sometimes the status and role of these Russian newcomers has become a major problem. It'll be useful to consider Putin's pretended motivation for this war. He falsely claims that Ukraine is controlled by fascists, neo-Nazis, the heirs of the German Nazis. In doing so, he uses the living memory of World War II. It is widely known that the German Nazis killed about 6 million European Jews. It is not well known in the West that the Russians lost about 20 million people in resisting the German invasion of Russia. This is a low estimate, and more recent estimates are higher. So Putin's invocation of World War II as justification for his own invasion of a supposedly Nazi Ukraine can be psychologically powerful. Russian soldiers are indoctrinated with it, and they believe it. However, the fact is rarely cited that when Ukraine gave up its substantial nuclear arms to Russia as part of achieving its independence in the 1990s, Russia signed a treaty promising to respect the independence of Ukraine. The present war, of course, is completely in violation of this treaty. Now let us briefly consider the effects of this war on the populations of Ukraine and Russia. Russia, with a much larger population than Ukraine, about 146 million, can afford to lose more casualties of war than Ukraine, and it has not hesitated to do so. Its losses so far are estimated at about 200,000 men. In this war, the Russian military has not been well supported or trained and has lost much equipment, often effectively supplying Ukraine with weapons and munitions which otherwise Ukraine would have lacked. Many Russian men of military age, sometimes with their families, have become refugees in neighboring countries such as Georgia, Armenia, and Kazakhstan, which were formerly members of the Soviet Union. Some have fled elsewhere, such as Serbia, Turkey, and Israel, to avoid death as part of a mismanaged Russian military. Thus, Russia has lost, excuse me, thus Russia has lost close to 1 million educated, some highly trained citizens. For instance, it has lost about 10% of its IT specialists. Cautious Russians who have stayed in Putin's Russia have learned to keep their heads down, since open opposition to the policies of Putin is risky and is often severely punished. Ukraine has a population of somewhat over 40 million, roughly a quarter of Russia's population, so its losses, which are of the same magnitude as those of Russia, are more painful. Putin's war, like that of the German Nazis, has focused just as much on civilians as on the Ukrainian military. In Ukrainian infrastructure, cities, and the living conditions of Ukrainian civilians have drastically suffered. The Russians have also destroyed libraries and cultural sites and carried off the contents of historical museums and so on. They have taken anything they could which might support Ukrainian national identity. In the same spirit, thousands of Ukrainian children have been deported to Russia to be indoctrinated in political camps and to be adopted by Russian families and to be brought up as little Russians. Essentially, the objective can be seen to be one step removed from genocide. Many Ukrainians, other than men of military age, have become refugees either within Ukraine or elsewhere in Europe, especially in Poland and in other adjacent countries such as Romania. More than 3 million people have fled from Ukraine. The partner church group of UUCC supports the work of Zsolt Solymosi, the Transylvanian Unitarian minister of the congregation of Besterțe in Romania. Zsolt has also been active in the support of Ukrainian refugees, especially a group which has come to his Unitarian High School in the city of Cluj. Zsolt has provided a video about those Ukrainian refugees, which we will see now.
Dear Partner Church members, dear friends, while I was getting ready to send you an update about the Ukrainian refugee situation in our area, suddenly the earthquake hit eastern Turkey and northern Syria, causing an unimaginable tragedy for people living there. Immediately we started to organize a humanitarian collection, and we were planning to drive there with a rescue convoy to help digging out people under the ruins. Even the 2 male family members from the Ukrainian refugees we host in our school building were working side by side with our team and offered their participation in this convoy. Imagine this, being a refugee, having your home and city destroyed by a cruel war, and offering your help to rescue other people in need. This is what I can call a good Samaritan, understanding who is truly our neighbor. We ended up not going due to uncertain situation in the area, but at least we managed to send a truck of humanitarian aid. What is the situation of the refugees close to a year after this meaningless war had started? At the Unitarian headquarters in Cluj, we took care close to 50 people, families from south and southeast of Ukraine. Some of them, mainly the women and the children from Odessa, returned home. It looks like Odessa will not be destroyed after all. Who can tell this? But we couldn't stop them to go home. Others managed to get visas to Canada. They went to Germany, starting a completely new life, but still living with the fear that husbands, or as we call it them, head of the families, still fighting at home, and they might not be able to reunite with their family. Others are still here, about a dozen, and we have tried to find a place to work for them. Children are gathered in a classroom learning Ukrainian. It is the most we can do for them. About every month, from donations, we drive to Odessa and to the Transcarpathia region of Ukraine, which is only a few hundred miles from our town, and we deliver medications, food, and lately generators and power banks. Just before Christmas, I took such a transport to a sister school in Beregovo, near the Hungarian and the Romanian border, and it was heartbreaking to see that even though this is not a place where bombs are exploding or people die due to the war, they have electric power only 2 hours a day. There is a shortage of food and supplies, medications. The town is mainly populated by women, children, and elderly people because men are fighting the war. The scariest thing for me, it was facing the digital approach of a war situation. When the sirens started to send people in town to the underground shelters, young children, many of them kids of my students' age, started to check on their cell phones application the locations countrywide where bombs are exploding. And they all started to pray that their father should remain alive. Very hard to imagine living like this for months and months without a clear sense of ending this meaningless war. Dear friends, we would like to thank you for your immediate and kind help you offered us last summer when, as a church community, you collected over $4,000 in a few days. Jean and Craig, thank you for coordinating this. It helped us to feed the families while the school cafeteria was off for summer, and we managed to organize a short summer camp for the refugee children. Thank you from our heart for this. You also truly understand what does it mean to be a caring neighbor, even from many thousand miles. I would like to end this short report with a positive thought. The Partner Church Committee is planning to organize a visit for a young member from our Beszterce partner, from your Beszterce Partner Church, and to myself. Hopefully, we will be able to see each other live at the end of June, talk and share joys and not just concerns. Blessed be and take care.
Time for closing hymn.
I invite you to join in singing our closing hymn, number 131, Love Will Guide Us. It's in your gray hymnal, and I invite you to stand as you're willing and able to join in singing.
Hymn number 131, stand if you are able. Thank you. Be seated.
So sorry that we couldn't see Zsolt, but do look at that video because he is such a dynamic man. And I hope that no matter what happens to the partner church movement across the country, and it has changed quite a bit during the pandemic, I do hope that this congregation will continue to keep up with Zsolt. He is a man to know and a Pied Piper with youth, energetic and so dedicated. And as you will see, his work with the Ukrainian people is so typical, just living in the moment, doing what's needed where he is. He is, I want to just remind you that this is in your bulletin, and this coming Sunday, next week, we are having a concert, a magical evening, and the money is for the Partner Church program. And one of the things we are hoping to do is have him and a young man he wants to bring to visit. It will be over the 4th of July holiday, so don't leave town. Come and meet Zsolt in person. One thing, we've had 3 ministers brought here from that church, and he speaks English so well and has lived a year in America, so really understands us and watches our videos of our church services and other Unitarian church services in other parts of the country. So do try to come and meet him if we can bring him. We're having a little visa trouble because he used to travel. He's Hungarian. Our group is Hungarian there and Hungarian speaking, but he used to travel on a Hungarian visa and now must travel on a Romanian passport, And he has to come here from Romania, you've got to have a visa, not from Hungary. So the closing words today are a Jewish prayer in the back of our hymn book, hearkening back to some of the teachings of the world's religions, how to think about war. Grant us the ability to find joy and strength, not in the strident call to arms, but in stretching out our arms to grasp our fellow creatures in the striving for justice and truth. Blessed be.
I want to thank the Partner Church for their participation in everything today. Dr. Cooper, that you heard speaking, he's also on that committee. So all of you, thank you so very much. That whole presentation was educational, it was scary, and it was challenging. So thank you all for that. So we extinguish this chalice. At the end of our time here today, may its flame glow gently in our hearts and light our paths until we are together again.
Please stand and join in our congregational benediction.
May the blessings of truth be upon us. May the power of love direct us. And may the peace of this sustain us till we meet again. Oh, thank you. I want to welcome the visitors again. Thank you so much for the nice supply of visitors we had here. Reverend Robinson will be back in the pulpit next week when the focus will be on the chilling impact of war on our understanding of our humanity and our mortality. So this concludes our service, and thank you again for joining us. You are welcome to stay in the back in the social hall. There are some light refreshments back there, so please join there. For visiting, grab some snacks. still remembering your restrictions COVID-wise. Thank you again, ladies and gentlemen, for coming.